Good morning. Thank you for those of you who sent in your assignments to finish up our last unit on algebra. And if you haven't sent me that yet, you can do that as soon as possible. We are starting a new unit on ratio. So before we get started on ratio, let's do a little warm-up exercise to get our brains going. So these are comparing fractions. So let's look at this. So 1/2 is equal to 6 over what? So what number would make this an equivalent fraction to 1/2? So if you remember, what you do is you think, well, 1 times what equals 6? 1 times 6 equals 6, so 2 times 6 will equal our answer, so 6 over 12. 3/5 equals what over 45? 45 times 9 equals 5 times 9 is 45. So let's multiply 3 by 9 and we'll get 9, 18, 27. Okay, so try to do these along with me. 10 over 7 is equal to 40 over what? So 10 times 4 equals 40. So 7 times 4 equals 28. So 10/7 is an equivalent fraction to 40/28. Last one, 9 over 20 is equal to what over 100? So what do we multiply 20 by to get 100? Times 5. So we'll do the same thing to the top so that they'll be equivalent fractions. 9 times 5 is 45. 45 over 100 is equivalent to 9/20. Okay, so let's do a tiny little review of fractions, and then we'll see how that relates to ratio. So if we have a fraction like this, okay, that's not good. That is not a good picture. Okay, let's try that again. So an important thing about fractions, as you guys know, is that each part has to be the same size or it's not meaningful. Okay, so let's shade this part in and we'll say that 1/3 is shaded. Okay, so what does that mean? So 1/3 is part, and then 3 is the whole. So 3 is how many pieces we have in total, and 1 is the part that we're talking about. So it's a comparison of part to whole. Now with ratio, we are doing a comparison of part to part. So there are some times where we want to say how many of something or how much of something we have out of the whole thing, and sometimes we want to compare the parts within it. So we could compare 1 shaded to 2 not shaded. So we could say 1 to 2. For every one part that's shaded, there's 2 parts that are not shaded. That would be a ratio. Now I'm going to give you an example of when it might be meaningful to use a ratio, and there's all kinds of times when you can do this. For example, if you are cleaning something with bleach, which is something I've been doing more regularly now that COVID-19 is on the go in the world, you need to know how much bleach you need for how much water, and it doesn't really matter how much water you have or how much bleach you have. What matters is the ratio between the two. So you don't need very much bleach per water, but that's one example. Or if you want to make some cookies, you need to know how much salt you need for every cup of flour, for example. So if you wanted to make a double batch or a triple batch, then you just need to know what the ratio is between those. Okay, so here's another example. So let's say we are looking at Micah's hockey team, okay? So let's look at his stats of his hockey team. So let's say that his team won 2 games, and they lost 1 game. That was when Micah was sick, so that was kind of sad. Okay, and then they tied 4 games. Okay, so if we wanted to find out the fraction of how many games he won, we would say, okay, he won 2 games, and then out of how many? So remember, the denominator here would be the total number of games. So 2 plus 1 is 3, plus 4 is 7. So Micah's team would have won 2/7 of his games. Okay, now let's compare someone else's hockey team. So let's say, okay, so this is Micah. Let's say this is Victoria. Victoria is a very serious hockey player. Okay, so Victoria's team, they won 2 games and they lost 3 games and they tied 2 games. Okay, so how many games, what's the fraction of the games that her team won? So she won 2 games out of, how many total games did she play? So 2 plus 3 is 5, plus 2 more, 7. Okay, so let's see. Now, whose team has a better record, Micah's or Victoria's? Okay, Micah's won 2 out of 7, and Victoria's won 2 out of 7. So it looks even at this point, right? We can't, they are both evenly matched. They've won the same amount of games. But if we look at some of the other statistics from their games, we can decide actually which team has a better record. But we can't do it with a fraction. We need another tool. So we could use a ratio. So this is interesting to find out what fraction they won, but how will we know which is actually a better team? Okay, so let's try this with a ratio. Let's look at the number of games that Micah's team won compared to how many his team lost. So that would be he won 2 compared to losing 1 game. So that's the ratio of how many games he won for every game that he lost. Okay, and then let's look at Victoria's team. So for every 2 games that her team won, they lost 3 games. So we can see that for wins to losses, actually Micah's team has better statistics than Victoria's team. So Micah's team is number 1 and Victoria is number 2. So that's still really great. Good job, Victoria. Okay, that's it. So that's a little introduction to ratios, and we'll continue doing this in the coming days, and I think we're going to enjoy it. So thanks for watching.